Hello all. Today we trace Karnataka's journey from NFHS round 4 to NFHS round 5 in respect of its performance in child malnutrition. Overall, Karnataka has done remarkably well in reducing the levels of wasting, while in stunting it gives a mixed picture, and there's a nearly similar pattern in underweight. We'll see it shortly. It has performed well on child mortality front in the rural areas, but there is a concern that there's a marginal increase in the infant and child mortality when it comes to the urban areas, and that should be a matter of worry. On the anemia front, the situation has shown some worsening, but the NFHS 5 anemia data is not all that implausible in the case of Karnataka, which we'll also see. And we had done an interesting innovation that we are also looking at some of the other parameters which might be influential in reducing the levels of child malnutrition. But we actually see a considerable variation in the performance in the state, particularly the northern half and the southern half. And therefore, we also looked at Karnataka's 4 NSSO regions. So it's important to map the journey so that we see how different regions are performing. And as we have always mentioned that these maps have been done with the help of 2 websites, NFHS4 indiagis.org and NFHS5.indiagis.org. Viewers are free to visit this site, to do their own analysis and draw their own conclusions. What do you see in an overview? Karnataka's own position vis-a-vis all India position, and you fairly clearly see that underweight and stunting, the reductions are there, but they are a lot more remarkable when it comes to wasting and to some extent severe wasting as well. So let us see how does the story unfold. But before that, it's important to keep in mind the 4 regions, NSSO regions of Karnataka. One is the northern region, and there's the southern Karnataka, there's the coastal and inland coast. These regions behave differently, but you will more or less see 2 types of variations, the northern half and the southern half, and sometimes it's also the eastern half and the western half. As the story unfolded when it comes to underweight, we see a near static picture across the state. But near static would still not mean that things haven't improved. The data range has shown an overall reduction from NFHS 4 to NFHS 5. If you see, it is from 20.3 at the lower end and 56.7% at the higher end in NFHS 4. That has come down to 15.6, significantly less, and 45.7. So that's something where we should give credit where it is due. Again, we are reiterating that there's a comparison of Karnataka with itself, so we are not comparing it with other states nor with its southern neighbors, Tamil Nadu and Kerala. But in this mapping, the NFHS 5 map shows a very interesting division, neat division into 3 regions, red, yellow and green. It's not always that you find such neat gaps. When it comes to stunting, get some kind of mix. The data range has reduced at the lower end. It goes from 18.6 to 15.6. 3% isn't too bad. On the upper end, however, there's a bit of an increase, very modest. And you see a mixed picture in both halves of the state. The northern tip seems to have improved. There is some improvement in the districts on the western central side. The southern districts seem to have a mixed picture, some doing not so well. So it's not as clear as it is in the case of underweight. And more importantly, let us see what happens to wasting. In wasting, you would notice a sharp improvement across the state. If you see the data range, and this is something which is worth noting, it has gone down from 14.3% wasted children at the lower end to 10.8. More interestingly, the higher end has come down from 43.1% to 26.6. Now that's fairly remarkable. And using NFHS 4 cutoffs themselves, you see this sharp improvement across the state. Also see what has happened in the case of severe wasting. Now, there also we see strong improvement across the state. The state needs to keep up this tempo in reduction of severe wasting and in reduction of wasting. I think this is something important. Here you notice the data range hasn't changed much. In fact, it has slightly worsened at the lower end from 2.7 to 3.5. That's not much of a bother. Interestingly, it has come down from 27.5% at the upper end in NFHS 4 to something like 13.3 at the. Now, this is something which is worth noting. Interestingly, when we come to child mortality, the state has done well in the rural, whether it is infant mortality rate, which has come down from 32 to something like 28 and 37 to 32.5 in the under 5 mortality. What worries one is this increase in the urban segment. Marginal increase, but from 19 to 21.4 for infant mortality, from 23 to 24.5 in under 5 mortality. This is one thing we should steadily, maybe even slowly, but should keep reducing. This increase is a matter of worry. In the overall picture, the neonatal mortality has also reduced between NFHS 4 and NFHS 5, particularly compared to infant mortality reduction, the neonatal mortality rate has reduced faster, which would also mean that the state may need to pay some more attention to post-neonatal mortality reduction. Be that as it may, we look at the anemia and we see a worsening as far as children in the 6 to 59 month age group is concerned. Here the data, if you notice, the data range hasn't changed much, unlike many other states where we have seen a sharp deterioration in the data range. Here it is moved from 46.6 at the lower end, 74.0 at the upper end, to something like 51 and 76, which is not so much of a change if you look at the change in NFHS 5 in many other states. When it comes to women in the 15 to 19 age group, again see worsening in the northern half. The southern half also hasn't done that well. So anemia picture isn't terribly satisfactory. We look at all women in the 15 to 49 age group and we see worsening in this northern tip or in the northern half. So repeatedly we are seeing this pattern of northern half not doing so well. So we wanted to look at a few other parameters in terms of how the state is performing. We picked the parameters related to women's agency because that might hold the key. And you would notice again here the northern segment doesn't do well, whether it comes to women's schooling, 10 years plus, whether it comes to women 20 to 14 who are married under the age of 18. Here again you see a worrying picture. And institutional delivery also, Karnataka's performance is pretty good. But you see this upper 1/3, northern 1/3 not doing well. And that picture remains more or less similar when it comes to NFHS 4. Overall improvement, yes, but the top one third of the northern districts, they give this worrying picture. Particularly underage marriage it hasn't done well, and though institutional deliveries, Karnataka's record is pretty good. But again, this top one third districts on the northern side, I think that is something which probably the state may need to look at a little more closely. We are flagging these three parameters because in our subsequent analysis, we will not just look at the malnutrition in terms of the outcomes, but we'll also try to look at what are the parameters where the states are doing well. So overall, Karnataka has done remarkably well when it comes to reducing the level of wasting, while in stunting it gives a mixed picture, and nearly similar pattern in underweight, the relative pattern we may say, though there has been a reduction. It has performed well in child mortality, both infant and under 5, but that is in the rural segment. And for a state like Karnataka with its urbanization, the urban mortality, child mortality levels going up should be a matter of worry. On the anemia front, the situation has shown some worsening, but we don't really consider the data implausible as far as Karnataka is concerned. And the regional differences are quite striking. And finally, if you look at some of the factors which influence, women's agency could be. So we leave readers with this thought and move to our next analysis. This time we haven't really looked at districts which could aspire to be Kuposhan Mukt, because in wasting, stunting and underweight, consistently better performing district, that's not so readily found. But Karnataka can look at some of its region or cluster of districts which could attempt to become Kuposhan Mukt. We leave the readers with this thought and we move to our other analysis. Thank you very much.